All right. Well, we have Aaron Tuminaro on the podcast today. Is that how you pronounce your last name? I was forgetting.
No, it's Tuminaro, but everybody pronounces it like
Tuminaro.
that, so it's whatever.
Yeah, is that Italian or
Yeah, Sicilian.
Sicilian? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to bring you on the podcast because we're always just bullshitting at work, basically.
Just like wasting as much time as possible by talking about anything that's not work.
Yeah. I mean, in a sense, it could still be considered work. I mean, if you're kind of
Sure.
training your mind a little bit, like, sorry, I have to talk about philosophy, so I'm like better at my job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just be like, Dane, I'll get back to you. I got an important conversation to get to.
So I wanted to ask you, you're always, I'm always like asking you, Aaron, what's the problem with the world? Why is everyone so crazy? And then all my questions, like any sort of variation from that, somehow it brings you to the conclusion that it's because of the family unit has dissolved.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get some clarification of what you mean by that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny because every time we talk about this, it seems like we come to the same conclusion with like very slightly different results.
Yeah.
I strongly believe so. Take it from the top down.
Okay.
You have, I don't know, the federal government, right? The federal government can't work if state governments don't work. So then you go to the state government.
Yep.
State governments don't work if the city government doesn't work, and then you go all the way down the line. Well, what's the most basic quote unquote government of people? And that's the family structure. So if the family structure isn't there, if there aren't fathers in the homes, if there aren't two parents raising children, all of that, then there won't be a community that can build a city, that can build a state, that can build a country, so on and so forth. So yeah, I think you have to take it down to its most basic atomistic structure, and that's the family unit.
So this is kind of that whole basic sort of Jordan Peterson clean your room first sort of philosophy.
Sort of that philosophy, at least from what I've seen, is more about before you point out the I don't know the twig in someone else's eye, address the log in yours, that type of thing. And it's kind of the idea of also just like start small and like do something that can fix your life moving forward. My this is, I would say, a little bit more along the line of identifying where where change can take place on a large structure. And change doesn't take place at the top. It never will. You try and in any time the federal government specifically, any federal government tries to do top-down change, it always has good intentions, but it will always have undue consequences because it has to start from the lowest common denominator and move up. At least that's how I've seen it throughout my life. I don't know. What do you think about that? I know you disagree slightly. I know you typically say that it's more community, so one level up from family.
I mean, I'd say it's all about the individual. Um, but I read this book, or at least most of the book. It's really boring. It's called Anti-Oedipus,
Okay.
and it's sort of it's basically the antithesis to your whole argument here. Is
Hmm.
that basically in modern day psychology, we root a lot of our problems for mental disorders on our early relationships with our family, early members of our family and our family structure and things like that. And anti-Oedipus takes it from a different lens as far as instead of analyzing things on that whole Freudian scale with the mother and father and child, it's analyzing things on a cultural, individual, family, puts everything together. And it kind of says that, hey, the family is not the cause of all of our mental disorders. But of course, that's kind of a side tangent to what I like actually think about this. In that I think that the family structure is important, but what's more important is that you have some kind of is that everyone has some kind of one of a father figure and two a mother figure, I guess. And I'd say even a step further from that is that if you have an even bigger extended family of individuals, such as your uncles and aunts and grandparents and things like that, then I think that would make for a better society because if you don't have that, like, you come from a big family, right?
Yeah.
And there's sort of, when you're in a big family, there's sort of a shared parenting going on. It's not just your parents. You have your grandparents, you have your uncles and aunts, you have your older siblings, you have your, I guess in a sense, you have your teachers, but that's kind of beyond what I'm talking about.
Hmm.
And you know what I'm talking about?
I think I see what you're saying is that it extends beyond the family, which I don't disagree with. I would say I would say that I agree with that sentiment, and you could even take it farther. You could say that, I mean, you were relating it, it sounds like, to mental illness, which you could take that farther from the
Yep.
family to the community and just all the way out. You could bring in friends, teachers, political figures. You could kind of go all the way down the line. My point is that it starts with the mother and father, or I guess if you're
Yep.
in a not typical family, a mother and mother, father, father, whatever, it doesn't matter. It starts with the people who raised you, and it starts with your siblings. Like that
Yep.
is the most basic structure.
I 100% agree with you there. I'm just thinking that, I mean, I'd say yes. A lot of our issue in our country is not just that the family unit has broken down, but also that a lot of families are just shit. And a lot of fathers are like,
Yeah, I mean that's true. That's
I
true.
mean,
Um, yeah,
there's a lack
I mean,
of, like, there's an alienation. Like, everyone's so alienated. We're always on our phones. We're kind of getting a lot of, we're getting raised by our teachers at school more than our own parents.
yeah, it's very strange. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, you look at the divorce rate, and it's 50% for first marriages, and then if you go beyond that, if you go to someone who's been in multiple marriages, it's even higher. I think it's like 65% or something, which is just insane because bringing children into that, and now you're raising a family, the instability that a child feels. I mean, thankfully, I never had to deal with
Same.
my parents splitting, but I can only imagine the instability that comes along with uh something as simple as being with your mom for the first couple of days of the week, and then driving across town and being with your dad. Like that's not the structure that a child needs in order to grow into a healthy adult. So it's things like that you need to, I say you, that society needs to figure out how to resolve before we can address larger issues.
So do you think, as far as, well, I watched this documentary years ago in college about uh, marriages in India, like arranged marriages, and how so
Mhm.
many of them are, the percentage success rate of those marriages are a lot higher than American marriages. But I think part of the reason for that is their culture, where they're
Yes.
very strongly for the family unit, right? The family unit is a
Hmm.
very important thing in India. Like, family is super important in their culture.
Hmm.
Whereas in America, I think it's sort of hyper individualist. And I think part of that, I don't know what your opinion on this is, but I think part of that is leading to the divorce rate where people kind of, it's almost like self-centered in a way where, like, oh, like, I'm not happy, so I don't want to be with this person anymore, instead of being like, you know, I'm not happy, but I'm sure I can persevere and make it work and compromise. And, like, for my children, whatever. Obviously, a lot of people have like bad situations where they're with someone abusive, um,
Hmm.
but probably the most likely scenario is that most marriages, there's not any abuse and
Hmm.
they just start not liking each other, basically.
I think that's what it comes down to. I'm not married yet. I do plan to be, but I feel like
We're
I'm,
getting there.
yeah, right. I feel like I observe people pretty well, and from what I have seen, is that people make a choice to not love every single day, and that's what it seems like it comes down to a lot. So if you stop making that choice, and like I agree with you, there's obviously situations of abuse, affairs, things like that, which I think it's personally reasonable, completely reasonable to get a divorce to separate yourself from that situation. But in situations where that's not happening, I would say that you have made a bond to this person. And in very real senses, you've also made a contract with this person. So I think that you should do everything that you can in your power to not break that contract. But yeah, going to what you're saying about Indian culture, for instance, you'll see that here as well. You don't see it as much in less religious places, but like for instance, I come from the South. I was very raised very religiously. So for us, we always heard about people getting divorced, for instance. But if
Yeah.
it was someone in our church, it was like, oh my God, they're getting a divorce. Do you know what's going on? Like it must be horrible. Like it was scandalous, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the kind of place I grew up in. I didn't even know someone who got divorced until I was, I don't know, at least late teenage
That's
years.
crazy.
So yeah, so it's a very different situation. The US is a huge country. I tend to believe that in general, people should shy away from divorce in almost every scenario. The exceptions being, again, in my personal belief, the exceptions being affairs and abuse. Um, but yeah, I think in every other instance, you have such a huge responsibility to keeping a marriage together, especially if children are involved, but also just for the sake of, like I said, the most atomic governmental structure of our society.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think another big thing there is that staying with someone can help you better yourself as a human being
Oh yeah.
because it makes you a lot less selfish if you're able to stay with someone, if you're able to compromise with them, if you're able to, again, choose, just like what you said, choose to love every day
Hmm.
instead of choosing to, say, continue arguments or pick fights or be dishonest, things like that. If you're just, you know, give it your all, be nice and everything, you'll come out a better person in the end as well.
Yeah. No, certainly. If you can, that is such a skill that most people don't even know that they need to master. If you can look someone in the face that you know you love and you hate them for whatever reason. I don't know. Maybe you got in a fight, and in the moment you hate them, but you know that you love them, right? And if you can look them in the face and you can continue to love them, that is a skill that, like, at that point, you are putting yourself in place and you're mastering yourself to an extent that most people don't ever get to. Because, like you were saying, we live in such an individualistic society that we're kind of told from a young age, it's about you. You can do whatever you want. You can become whoever you want. But no, whenever you're in a marriage, it's not about you. It's about the two of you. There's
Yeah.
no longer you and the other person. There's one new person.
Yeah, and like I just like started like I just found this out in my current relationship where like, I've been in a few different relationships and I just recently like realized that, oh yeah, you know what? The reason why they never worked out was because I was being selfish and I wanted all these things for myself and like, oh, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to be free and et cetera, et cetera. And then I realized that you know what? Like it's not all about me. Like
Yeah,
it's about
yeah,
like it's about being with someone and because you don't get happy by like being super successful, making a bunch of money. Uh you don't find happiness that way. You find happiness through the people that you're with. I mean,
agreed.
that's
Yeah,
that's bottom line.
yeah. I mean, and that idea of like finding happiness with the people you're with has also become so like has been like twisted so much, and you can see that really strongly in hookup culture. It's this
Yeah.
idea. I don't even know if people know why they're doing it, but it seems to me that it's this idea that in the moment I want someone, I'm telling myself it's for whatever reason. Maybe I'm just,
Yeah.
out at a club and that's just, X, Y, and Z, it leads there, right? But in the moment, you want to have another person. And rather than going through the quote unquote proper steps to get that person, to court that person, to marry them, it's just one and done, you're out. And that is like such a perverse view of a relationship with another person. Like forget about sex, forget about all that, but just about having that connection with another person, it is such a contorted view of what that should look like. And we have just normalized that throughout all of our society. And that's another place that I think we go back to the family. If we had strong family units who could show young people what it looked like to have another person that you could spend and build a life with, but
Yeah.
instead we just, I don't know, it's just the joy of the self. Just go out and find whatever makes you happy, whatever gives you fulfillment, and pursue that to the most of your extent. And it's like a cancer. It really is.
Yeah, and as far as that goes, I think like people aren't like we're commodifying relationships, right? I mean, with social media, with TikTok, with like dating apps, things like that. And there aren't really even dating apps like the swipe left or right apps. Like it's not
Uh,
like that's not dating. It's fucking
no,
like
it's a hookup app. That's what they all are.
yeah, and it's like you're commodifying yourself. You're making there's when you meet someone online, there's no pheromones going on. There's no like oh I see that girl over there like walking like towards me.
Mm-hmm.
There's no risk. There's no risk involved
Yeah,
when you're online swiping left or right. You're not walking up to someone and being like, "Hey, how are you?" Like
yeah,
just try and hit on them. So I think it kind of it commodifies it. It makes it a quick transactional thing.
yeah. And it also, I forget who was saying it, but I heard someone talking about how whenever people go online and we have these different personas on dating apps, on social media or whatever, we have these different personas, and these personas kind of become a different version of ourselves. It's like it's almost like a weird mesh between humanity and like robotics, right? It's like we almost become a different version of ourselves in a way
So like
that
profile culture, kind of
profile
like we'll have
culture,
a
but almost,
profile that's
yeah,
kind of different than us.
yes, but they were saying it more in a way of like um like a robotic version of humanity. You
Yeah,
know what I'm saying? It's like whenever you have these profiles, you can say whatever you want because these people don't exist. They're not the person that, even if it's the same face, it's not the person that you would see in the supermarket or whatever. It's just complete, like you're saying, completely no risk. There's no there's no growth that even happens. You're just there
yeah.
going from person to person. It means nothing.
Well, you're dehumanizing people in a sense.
Yeah, turning them into a picture and a profile.
Well, have you ever played Grand Theft Auto?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, on Grand Theft Auto, you do some horrible shit. Like, yeah. Or at least
Sure.
I have.
Yeah.
Like, you just shoot random people, run people over, like stuff like that.
No, the best, yeah, the best part about the game is not playing the game. It's just like running people over, just getting the cops to chase you for no reason.
Well, uh, my my point there is that when you're in a digital world and you know that there's no consequences for your actions and everyone in the world are fake, you kind of act in the world as if nothing matters.
Hmm.
So that there's no weight to any of your decisions. So when you're
Yeah.
online, on Facebook, whatever, there's no weight to your decisions. Whereas if you're in person, there's a weight. It feels like there's a weight. You could get punched if you say something mean. You could get a beer thrown in your face if you say the wrong pickup line or whatever, right? There's stakes at hand. It's not just a video game. It's not meaningless. It means something when you're in person, I suppose.
No, I completely agree with that. I do. I would say the only slight difference is that we know that there's another person on the end of that. It's just
Yeah,
I don't think people really identify with it, you
no.
know, which kind of goes back to your point. There's no stakes, there's no point in it.
Well, and it's also just so easy to just click send and then like fuck it. All right, I'm throwing my phone over there. I'm not gonna look. Not gonna look at the reply.
Yeah, doesn't matter.
I'm out. Because I don't know how many times have you ever experienced it where you like send a risky text or something and then you just throw your phone over the side and you
Yes.
don't want to look at the reply.
Yeah, yeah. I've definitely been there. Um, I mean that's a little bit different because if I'm if I'm in a situation where I'm sending a risky text, that means that I have stake in the game. That means that I'm getting,
That's
butterflies
true.
in my stomach. There's hormones that are going on, right? So like it's a
Yeah,
different
y-
situation than
yeah, I
if you're
agree with that.
scrolling on Tinder and you see a girl and you're just like, I don't know, just like whatever type of text you want to send. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. You could say anything from, hey, what's up, to something that's like completely out of the bag, like very insulting. It doesn't matter because they're just gonna ignore it. You know what I mean? Like there's no stakes to online dating.
Yeah, there's no stakes and it's just like I don't know, you just swiping left like why don't you just go outside? Like
Yeah, go
like
touch
you just
grass, right?
huddled inside, you're like just go experience life, stop scrolling, like
I think
viewing
I think what
it's like you're shopping online. I don't know.
yeah, I think what it comes down to for most people, and then I've tried dating apps before. I don't love them. I've never gotten anywhere with them. I much prefer just meeting someone in person, which I know that's kind of like cliche to say, but it's the truth. I think what most people get out of it, even if they don't realize they're getting out of it, is that you can just talk to people.
Yeah.
You don't. It doesn't even. It doesn't have to lead anywhere. You don't have to go on a date. Like so I think we have a very lonely generation of people who just want to talk to someone else, even if it's just a completely random
Yeah.
stranger on the internet.
Yep.
Because if you're on Tinder and someone swipes right on you, then that means that they found you attractive, and that can give you like a little boost of serotonin. And then if you talk to them and they say something that's, I don't know, a little flirty, that gives you a little bit of serotonin. Like it's just we're so lonely nowadays that any minuscule interaction that we can have with another person, even if it's not real, means something. And I think that's really sad, but I suspect that's why most people, utilize those apps.
Yeah, it's kind of as far as our loneliness goes, I think a lot of it is just that many of us just spend our time in our houses alone.
Yeah.
It's like
No, I
typing away.
mean,
I mean, I work
COVID
remotely,
COVID didn't help. That
so
was like 3 years,
yeah.
but I agree we do it to ourselves.
Yeah, and like
It's like
I don't know.
it's like the internet is the best and worst invention that people ever made. It's like humanity is at this crossroads where we either come out on the other end and we survive, or we are destroyed because we created our own destruction. I think the internet and loneliness and all of that could be that bad. I really do. Because I mean, like, just think about the number of people who are medicated, self-medicated or professionally medicated. I don't know the exact numbers, but I imagine, anxiety, depression, all of that, all of those types of medications, it's probably gone way up since, the 50s, the 40s, way before the internet was invented. And it's
Yeah.
got to play a role, I would imagine.
No, I'm sure. And I mean, you see old people, they have like 20 different pills they gotta take
Yeah, that's true.
every day. And a lot of that is also it's not just the dismantling of the family unit, but I think one of our biggest issues in society is the repression of death. Is
Okay,
that
you have to explain that.
we kind of try to shove death off to the side. Like we put like I've only ever seen I'm not even sure actually if I've ever even seen a dead body before. Like
I
I
have.
feel you have okay. And it's
Yeah.
like it's just we're so afraid of death. Like during COVID, We're like, oh, we gotta save everyone. We gotta, wear masks. We gotta have our, vaccines and everything. Like, we have to make sure everyone lives. And it's like, guess what? Every single person on the planet that's living right now, actually every single living thing that exists on the planet right now will die. So I get the point that yeah, we gotta save people, but at the same time, they're gonna die. So it's kind of it's like, are you gonna live your life alone and cast it away and kind of following all the government's orders, or are you going to kind of just be free? It's the balance between security and freedom.
Hmm.
And I think people are kind of choosing security more and more as the years go by. And they're kind of saying, like, fuck freedom because in this very secure world, our technology is so advanced that everything's so comfortable that we're okay with whatever freedoms are taken away from us as long as our comfort isn't taken away.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a risk assessment. Every day we make a risk assessment, right? So, I mean, every single person, okay, let me say it this way because I've heard other people say this, and I think that it's a good analogy. If we really cared that much about saving every single person, one of the main ways that we could save a lot of people is lowering the speed limit, right? So you could lower the speed limit to 15 miles an hour, and basically no one would ever die from a car crash. But no one would also ever get anywhere. We would all just have to walk because there's no freaking point in getting your car and driving it everywhere. So you have to make that risk assessment and you have to acknowledge every single time you get in the car that there is a risk of death, even if it's, minuscule. There is a risk of death. So I don't know why that didn't happen with COVID. It definitely seems like it didn't happen. I know for me and mine, we made that risk assessment and we continue to live our lives. Other people didn't. Like for instance, my grandparents, they were very weary about it until the vaccine came out. They shied away from the rest of the family. They didn't go to church, that type of thing, which I completely respect. They have their health issues and things like that. Um, but for 20 somethings or even younger, for 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, I don't know. They seem to have been very, very scarred by what happened over the past couple of years, which I can reason with that. Because if you're in high school, say you're in ninth grade, and the last 3 years of your high school experience are taken away, you don't get to see your friends, you don't get to interact with them in person, and now you're just stuck behind a screen.
That'd be
I
fucked.
can see how there would be damage, and the whole time you're stuck there, everybody says it's just for your own good. So I think I see what you're saying about protecting people to their own detriment. But I will say that we also want to protect people, right? You don't want to
Yeah,
just have
yeah,
such a
of
dangerous
course.
society that people are just dying left and right. But
Yeah,
there
of
is a risk
course.
assessment that has to be taken with everything. You could I don't know get hit by a bus tomorrow, but you're still going to go outside.
Yeah, it's just, I
That's
mean, you
just
have
part
to
of
have some
life.
like, you have to be able to like balance these things. And I think just the state like mandated it too much, at least in
Hmm.
my opinion. But I think a lot of it is also like the government, at least throughout human history, governments have used your safety as a reason to take away your freedom, as like their number one tool,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. Well,
Um,
it's easy to make a
convince.
populace toothless if they're scared for their own safety. You know.
Yep. Yeah, and the because when you're afraid, you'll do anything. I mean, at least most everything. If someone tells you, "Oh, you're gonna die unless you do this or that," and most of the
Yeah.
time they'll follow your orders or whatever because they don't want to die.
Well, it's
Um,
not only you don't want to die, but you also don't want to be the one to stand up to the mob.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I say mob not in the very literal sense, although there were some mobs over the course of COVID. But I mean in the sense of you don't want to stand against the wave, you know? That is a very difficult position to be in, is to be the one person standing up and saying what you believe to be right, even if maybe necessarily you don't have all of the information to back it up. Like at the very beginning of
Yeah.
COVID, there was limited information. We didn't know what we didn't know, right? I distinctly remember I had a friend who was living in Australia, and right whenever the outbreaks happened, he's from here. So right whenever the outbreaks happened, we were on the phone, and I was like, "Man, you need to leave Australia and you need to get back here." Like I think I even told
Yes.
him, if you're gonna die, it's better to be around your family. But that was before we had any information
Yeah.
about how deadly it was. And then as time went on, I relaxed about it. I started going around friends and all that type of stuff, but it didn't seem like anybody else was. It seemed like everybody was still at the same heightened level of paranoia and
Yeah.
anxiety for no reason.
Yeah, no, at first I was like not worried about it at all. And
Mhm.
then I was worried about it for a bit, and then I was just like, yeah, this is just like I honestly don't give a fuck anymore. Like, um
Yeah.
but I do like as a disclaimer, like I did care at
Mhm.
at one point, and I do think it's a complicated issue. And it's not just like black or white, like, oh, the government was oppressing us, or oh, it was all a lie, et cetera, et cetera. I do think it's a very complicated issue, and I don't envy the people who had to make all the decisions regarding it, basically.
I don't envy them, but I also don't respect them all that much. Only because it seemed as if the people that we elected to make those types of decisions, rather than making those decisions, they were just turning over the power to um, intellectual officials. And it's like, all right,
Yeah,
I respect you, but I didn't vote for you. You shouldn't be making policy decisions. You shouldn't be
yeah,
deciding what direction the government's taking. So it was a difficult situation. I'll agree with you on that.
yeah,
But I definitely think too many people kind of kowtowed to the intellectual elite idea of we have to shut down everything. No one can go
yeah,
anywhere. Everyone has to stay inside, especially kids. It's one thing. It's one thing to say we need to protect the elderly, you know, 50 years old and older. Although that's not elderly, we need to protect 50-year olds and older. It's another thing to say, 10-year olds can't see their friends. It's like there was, and to this day, there is no evidence that children were as at risk as an 80-year-old. So it's like
yeah.
that's kind of where risk assessment comes in. We have to accept the parents. I say we. The parents should have accepted the fact that your 10-year-old might get sick. They're almost definitely not going to die, but they might get sick. That's just part of life.
I Do you think people are, say, maybe just too comfortable these days?
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, there's that old saying. Um, there's that old saying. It's like kind of a cliche, but it's cliche for a reason. What is it? Oh, good times breed weak men. No, yeah. Good times breed weak men. Weak men makes bad times breed strong men. Strong men breed good times. Good times breed weak men. So it's like we're at just a crux where the times are so good that everybody's weak. And I mean intellectually
Yeah,
weak. We don't think
yeah,
about it. We don't question things. We just go
yeah.
with it.
Yeah, and I think I mean we saw that with, say, like the Roaring Twenties, and then after that,
Mhm.
we have all this we have the Great Depression, and then just everyone just basically followed suit with dictators. I mean, even in our own country, the president was elected for like 4 terms, right? Roosevelt,
3.
3 terms.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was just kind of, I feel like when things are good, you want them to stay good. So
Mhm.
you will comply with the government because you don't want your good times to end, basically. Um,
Yeah. That's true. I will say though, in that specific time period, with Roosevelt and the 20th century, that you also had just kind of going back to what you were saying about just the fear of it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, at that point, there was the Second Great War. People thought it was the end of
Hmm.
the world. That's another instance where you'll do anything to
Yeah.
survive, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think when times are good, like the storm comes after the calm just as much as the calm comes after the storm. And
Hmm.
I think when things are good, I feel like people can feel a certain like anxiety in the air that something bad is going to happen. Like almost like
Mm.
things are a little bit too good. It seems a little suspicious. And I think people catch on to that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
does that
I,
makes
I
any
think
sense?
I think I agree with you. Yeah.
Like it feels like I don't know how you feel, but sometimes it feels like it constantly feels like something catastrophic is constantly almost about to happen. Like we're almost
It.
about to get a nuclear war with Russia and China. We're almost about to like
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know. I think I see what you're saying. I think it's more like no, actually, I'll agree with you. It does kind of feel like there's imminent destruction right around the corner. Um, yeah. I don't know, man. I don't know what causes that. I will say I think that some people are constantly looking for something to be scared of, or maybe
Yeah,
not something to be scared of. People are constantly looking for something to put their minds away from themselves. So if you
I
can
agree.
if you can become part of, I don't know, a movement or a group of people who's being oppressed or something, or if you can put yourself into a situation where you no longer have to think about yourself and your own problems, that's somehow comforting, I think, to people. Like there's the stress that comes along with it, but there's also the camaraderie that comes along with being part of um, a group of people who are going through something. Like you'll see, like whenever the Ukraine war first started, right? Forget, regardless of how you feel about the Ukraine war, whenever the Ukraine war first started, you saw Ukrainian flags everywhere. I and I don't want to say that everyone is was uneducated, but like you saw Ukrainian flags everywhere, and how many of those people do you think actually did their research and understood what was happening in the area at the
Yeah,
very beginning of the war? Versus how many people do you think who just saw something on Instagram and wanted to be part of it? So they started like putting things up, and then they
yeah,
got their anxiety up and they were angry about it. It's
yeah.
like, all right, you're just inventing things. Maybe there is real reason to be angry there, but did you actually have a reason to be angry about it, or were you just jumping on the bandwagon?
No, I agree with you there. And like I noticed that if I don't watch the news, I just don't get scared about stuff like that.
Yeah, if you
Because
don't know
like,
about anything, it's easy to not get scared about stuff.
well, I mean, the thing is, in actuality, like you don't really have a whole lot to worry about in life. I mean, you just have your own area to worry about, really, and until
Hmm.
something bad happens, you don't have control over it, right? Um, and as far as joining a group goes, I think people, again, they're so lonely nowadays, right? And people want to feel important. And in a world of 7 billion people, it's kind of hard to feel important, especially
Mm,
when, say, the family unit is broken down, like you're always saying. Uh, if people don't have a family where they can feel important for, it's kind of like, who do I feel important for? Right? Do I feel important for the government, the Democratic or Republican parties? Do I feel
hmm.
important for my job, et cetera, et cetera? And if you're trying to feel important for these organizations instead of, say, people in your life, I think it can lead to some really serious problems.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think The idea that you're talking about as far as feeling important for another person. I mean, you talk to any parent, any good parent, I should say. There's some real awful parents out there, but talk to any good parent,
Yeah,
and they will tell you that their purpose in life is their children. Their purpose in life was is being a parent. So
yeah,
whenever you take that away from people, and I do mean in the sense of across the entire developed world, we're getting to a point where the birth rate is not or is very close to or not outpacing the death rate. So we're not. It's kind of getting dangerous as far as the replacement of the population. And it's like, well, why is that happening? It's like, okay, well, because people aren't getting married. The having children is not as important anymore, or people think it's not important anymore. It's like, okay, well, we need to realign ourselves and realize what actually is important. And it's the people that matter around you. It's not the Ukrainian war. It's not COVID. It's
yeah.
not, I don't know, your neighbor Shelly down the street who's a real asshole. Like it's none of that, right?
Dude, fuck
It's your
Shelly.
children. It's your family. And until you get to a point where you're ready to have children and family, you're allowed to be selfish, but you can't be selfish into your mid 30s. You know, you can't be
No.
40 single and selfish. That is a waste of life. I mean, to be perfectly frank, unless you have some accentuating circumstances. Like there's very few people who are going to do something more important than raise a family. Like Albert Einstein, he never needed to raise a family because he changed the world on his own. For most of us, we're only going to change the world by creating a better generation. And most people
Yeah.
don't realize that. Most people are so caught up in their own self worth and in the issues that are going on around the world that they think that, oh, I don't want to raise a kid. I don't want to bring a kid into this world. All right, well, bring the right kid into this world and that can help solve our problems, you know?
So I agree with you. I just have like one thing in that is that the only people that will survive and reproduce are going to be the people who are reproducing, right? So the cultures or the kinds of people that go and want to have children, they're going to be the people who have the most children at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So while yes, I agree with you, there's a real problem that the birth rate is going down, the death rate is increasing. The people who aren't producing children are the people who don't want kids, right? So they're gonna die and they're gonna be removed from the whole thing along with their ideas, basically. Uh, so I think it kind of comes down to like, does having all these people that don't want children or that don't have children, that don't want the family unit, will that how badly will that negatively affect the people who do want to have a family and do want to have children, I guess.
I mean, I would say it can negatively impact it quite a lot because say you're a 20 something year old girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I specifically say girl because it seems like I could be wrong. It seems as if um like ideas spread faster along the female population than they do along the male population. Maybe
Yeah.
that's just because they're smarter than we are. I don't know. But it seems like that happens. Um, so, for instance, if you're a 20-year-old female and none of your friends want to have kids, all of your friends are pursuing, their career and they don't care about having kids, which that's
Yeah.
fine. But if you're in a situation where you don't have anyone around you to emulate, if you don't have anyone around you to be part of a community of just like, I want to raise a family, I want to be part of that, then you may not be as incentivized to do it. So I think there definitely is danger to society because no one lives in a vacuum, right? You can't just
Right.
have some insane BS idea and then just exist in society and it matters to no one. Because your insane BS idea could inspire, I don't know, honestly, like take the most extreme example, take Hitler. Like Hitler was disgusted by the Jewish population.
Yeah.
His insane idea, if it didn't affect anyone, it would have just been his insane idea. But he was
Yeah.
able to affect millions of other people to get him on board with his crazy xenophobic racist things.
Yeah.
And millions of people died because of it. So I'm not saying that every girl who doesn't want to have a kid or every guy who doesn't want to be a father is Hitler. Obviously, that's insane. But
Yeah.
I am saying that ideas spread,
Yeah, they
and
spread like a
not
virus.
and exactly, and not addressing ideas that are dangerous for society, like that you don't need to have a kid until you're 30 or whatever. I don't know. I disagree with that. I'm not saying everybody needs to have a kid at 30, but I'm also saying that we need to create a society where if you and yours want to have kids young, then that's just
Up to
as
you.
yeah, that's up to you. But it's also just as good as anything else, as any other option.
Yeah.
So I think, and I
Yeah.
think that comes down to the community, like you were talking about. If your community is completely infected with these people who don't think having children is important, then you also might not think children are important, and it spreads.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Do I think that it should be like I don't at the same time think people should have the right to not have a family, right? Or not
Oh, I'm
have
not saying
children.
I'm not saying we force people to have
Yeah, I mean,
babies.
I know that. Like I know that. But
I'm saying
but
we have
like
to
the thing
confront.
here,
I'm saying we have to confront ideas.
yeah, no, like I totally like I know what you mean. Like I was trying to imply that you're like trying to imply that. Like I'm just saying like um I don't think I think there's a lot of people out there that don't have children, or that if you look back in time in history, there's like so many people out there that didn't have children that like made extremely important like scientific like advancements for our world, right? Um, and I think there's something to that in that like yeah, sure. Like you might not have a kid, you might not want to have children. Or I guess I'm gonna backtrack a little bit in that I don't think people should be like trying to convince other people to not have children, at least, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, like don't convince people to not have children, but also I do kind of want to also confront the idea that there might just also be too many people in the world. That in a sense, it's good that some people aren't having children because then when I have children, they'll grow up in a world with less people, I guess. I don't know.
So are you taking that stance, or do you said you're confronting that stance?
I'm just I guess I'm just confronting it. I do believe that there is way too many people on the planet. Um, like
So whenever you say that, what do you think the ideal population is, and what group of people do you want to not be alive anymore to get you to that goal? Because that's like, I mean, like I get what you're saying. Plenty of people say it, but whenever you actually confront the idea, it's like it's genocidal. You know
yeah,
what I
no,
mean? I'm just
exactly.
like, there's
That's
too many
why it's
people.
like
It's like, all right, well then, who should die?
yeah, no, exactly. Like whenever people bring that up, it's like the first thing that comes to their mind is like, okay, well, should people die? And it's like,
Yeah,
no, but no, people shouldn't die, but
maybe we shouldn't replace them. Is what you're saying.
like maybe we should just let the people not having kids, let them not have kids, and maybe we should let kind of just let diseases spread if we want to. Like, I don't know, like maybe let things kind of run their natural course a little bit more rather than controlling them. Because I feel like when we try to control our problems in society, we end up creating like 10 more, I guess, if
Hmm.
that makes any sense.
Yeah, I will say, I don't really have the numbers on it, so I can't speak on that. I will say though that the replacement rate across the entire developed world is dangerously low, and in
Yeah.
a generation, a country could collapse because it doesn't have enough people. Now,
Yeah.
I could potentially see an argument. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I could see a reasonable argument that, all right, well, maybe that needs to happen. Maybe there's too many people, climate change, X, Y, and Z. I don't agree with that argument. Um, I would say that we need to have more kids.
Okay.
That if we need to start, okay, here I'll take it this. There years
Okay.
ago, years and years ago, people thought that we were going to approach a population that we could not feed. There were going to be too many people on Earth.
Yeah.
So they started talking about, what do you do about it? And then one scientist, I forget his name, but one scientist figured out how to how to grow more wheat on a specific on the same amount of property. And by doing that, he saved the world because he was able to feed the people. So I don't think that we address the growing population by discussing how to get rid of people. I think we address the growing population by discussing what do we need to do in order to accommodate these people. In my personal
Yeah.
belief, I think we're getting to a point where we start looking towards colonizing other planets. I know that seems kind of crazy, but I think we're pretty close to starting to do that.
Yeah, I mean,
And that would be
uh,
that would be my view
yeah.
at it.
No, like I agree with you. Like why like how do you stop thinking about getting rid of people and we start thinking about like maybe just going to other planets? Like
Yeah. Yeah,
um
I'm just saying, whenever the idea of the growing population comes up, we don't address it as, well, how many people can we get rid of? But we rather address it as what scientific change needs to take place in order
yeah.
to accommodate the growing population, and how can the growing population, fuel economic and scientific development? That's what
Yeah.
I don't know. That's what I think. Take the story of wheat as an example. I think it was the 1900s, um, that people were having this conversation about we are not going to be able to feed the world's population, and then someone developed wheat that was able to be grown better, and now we can feed the world's population. It was
Yeah, and then
something
there was
simple like
like
that. I wish I could remember exactly who it was.
I think also like they made like better fertilizer and stuff like that.
Yeah, just better farming practices, and now all of a sudden people don't have to die.
Yeah, I guess my only thing with more people is that more people means that we also have to say get rid of more nature to accommodate for them. But obviously that's actually not the case because you could just build up instead of
Yeah.
out, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I think you've probably seen it as well. I remember seeing those like stories or whatever that the entire world's population could fit into Texas if it was the density of Manhattan or whatever.
yeah.
It's like we definitely have enough space, but I do agree with you. It's that if we're gonna continue to grow, we have to change the way that we interact with the world.
But it's also like I don't want to live in a city. I want to live out in the country. But
Yeah.
if everyone wanted to live out in the country, we wouldn't have a world anymore. Like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, we also wouldn't have cities, right?
yeah.
There's obviously a large percent of people who like to live in cities, but I'm with
Yep.
you. I don't want to be anywhere near a city. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
in Boise, but that's a small city compared to like New York, Tokyo, places like that.
So how do you think living in a densely populated area, like how do you think that affects the family unit, I suppose? Like you moved from Louisiana to Boise. So like what have you noticed as far as differences go between say living on a kind of a property to living in an apartment now?
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, for me specifically, it's a little bit different. So I moved from Louisiana. My family,
Yeah.
we all grew up on the same piece of property, like same 13 acres.
Yeah.
So I was there with my grandparents, with my aunts and uncles, with brothers and sisters and everything. So we were all literally right next to each other. Um, and then whenever I moved here, it was a very big adjustment. I don't know if I've noticed anything specific about the family structure in a more densely populated area.
Yeah.
I mean, I can just say that, it's been very different for me. It's definitely not the way that I want to grow up. I couldn't really imagine raising a family in a city. Even though Boise is barely a city. I mean, 200,000 people. It's not that many people. Uh, but it is much more densely populated than what I'm used to. Yeah, I don't know, man. I would say it's different. Whenever I was growing up, there was always this idea that, my mom was in the home, and then whenever we started going to school, she became a teacher and she was in school with us. And then we rode home with her. And so we were all like
Yeah.
we were always with with a parent. And then,
Yep.
whenever it was the summer, my mom was home, my dad was working, and my mom would just like tell us to go outside, just play outside and don't come back until it's dark, like that type of thing.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it definitely is different. I couldn't tell you how it impacts families though. I would imagine, whenever you have the opportunity to be around family as much as I did, it's more positive than negative. But I'm really not sure. What about you? What was your family structure? Because I know you moved back to Coeur d'Alene to be closer to your family.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say it was kind of a bad question because obviously you don't. If you had a family in Boise, maybe you'd be able to answer that, but you don't.
Yeah.
Um, I would say like in a city, as far as my experience, there's like it's harder to. It's not cities. It's just more like in our modern society. I feel like we get out of school and then we're expected to go find a job somewhere, right?
Hmm.
And a lot of times those jobs are not in your small town that you were from where all your family is. Like you got to go find a job, say in Boise or in Seattle or Los Angeles or in these big cities, right? And I feel like a lot of these big cities are where people are. A lot of people leave where they're from and they go to these big cities basically to get a job, right? And I think that's a cool thing on one hand, say because my grandpa John he left from Norway to go to America to start to try to make some money, right? So there's kind of that nomadic element in there, but it's also you're also leaving your family in a sense. So it's kind of a balance there where it's kind of hard to decide like are these cities helping or hindering us, I guess. Like is all this progress in our society is it doing us good or bad? I don't know.
Hmm. I would say I would say we're kind of at an interesting crossroads in society because we now have the technology where people don't need to be in cities anymore. Like
Yep. Remote
you
work.
could
Yeah.
exactly remote work. You can at least people who work in an office can remote work.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's many industries where
Yep.
you can't do that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. I mean, you and I both can remote work, but there are people who can't. But take it even farther than that. Like, even though it wouldn't be the same, you can see a concert on your TV. You can talk to your friends on
Yeah.
FaceTime. You can do all of the. You can Uber Eats from an hour away, even though it'd be expensive. Like, you don't have to be in the same metropolis as everybody else in order to
Yep.
get the same, goods and services that you would from there. So it's kind of, I think we're kind of getting to a place where it's possible to look at the city and not have to address it the same way that we always have. Because I mean, back in the day, the city existed because people came together and they
Yeah.
made, businesses and things like that, and they were able to sell to the person down the street, and it just like grew and grew and grew and grew. Like usually in ports or whatever. But now you don't have to have it to that same extent. Um, I don't know. I kind of forgot what question you were asking, but I think we're getting to a place where the city's not as important. Or rather, let me say it this way: I think we're getting to a place where the city doesn't have to be as important anymore,
Yep.
and cities are going to have to make a reason for them to still exist. Because, like you said, I don't want to live in a skyscraper. I want to have property. Like I don't want to
Yeah.
be I don't want to be constantly surrounded by other people. So if we as a society are going to still like have cities and have be surrounded by millions of people constantly, like LA or New York or Dallas or whatever, then there needs to be reasons for that to exist. And it can't just
Yeah.
be, oh, you need to work in office because I say so. You know, it needs to be you coming into the office and commuting to the city or living in the city has benefits that you otherwise could not get. I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems like we're at a place where we could redesign how we live in around other people. Because it basically used to be cities. Outside of the cities, you had suburbs. All the families lived in the suburbs and they commuted into the city. You don't
Yes.
have to do that anymore.
Yeah. Just stay in the suburbs.
Just stay in the suburbs, or don't even live in the suburbs anymore. Because the only reason we built the suburbs is because they were close to the cities.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I think that's honestly a good place to end it. Like that was good discussion. I feel like you
Okay.
toppled a lot of shit, and you're a smart guy.
Oh, thank you.
All right, everyone. Well, peace out. Take it easy.